Hi, folks, welcome back. So, today we'll be continuing our lecture series about the trait approach and understanding personality through this approach. Last week, we spoke about the various trait theorists and pioneers within this approach, including Gordon Allport, Cattell, Donald Fisk, and so on. Today, we'll be going more into the different areas of investigation under the trait approach as well as the relevant research. Here is a little caption of the type A, type B personality types that we'll be covering also within this presentation. So the outline for today's presentation is we'll be talking about achievement motivation, type A, type B, the hostility and health factors under this. We'll talk about social anxiety, emotions, optimism and pessimism, and we'll end the presentation with a summary of everything we covered during today. So when we see the words need for achievement, what is a need for achievement? What distinguishes a high need for achievement person from a low need for achievement person? Well, deconstructing this, we see that a need for achievement is nothing but a desire to accomplish something difficult, to master, manipulate, or organize, to overcome obstacles and attain a high standard. And the need can be assessed using the thematic apperception test. So what is the thematic apperception test? We had covered this last presentation, but this is how it looks like. You're given a card, a black and white picture that tells a type of story, but it's a story that must come from you. It should be your perception of what's going on here. So I will ask you, who is this person? What is he doing? How will things turn out? I want you to look at this person. Think for a minute before you answer these questions. Now, each of you could have a different story to tell when you look at this picture. Scientists and investigators have shared that the perception, the story you choose to tell yourself based on this picture, also reveals your need for achievement. So, whether you see a man thinking about a difficult business problem or dreaming about going fishing indicates your own level or need for achievement. So if some of you see this person thinking about problem solving, thinking about strategizing, working towards their goals, then it's most likely a reflection of your own need for achieving things. However, if someone sees, oh, this guy is so bored, he seems like he's daydreaming, he's looking at the clock to see when can he go home, it means it is more likely that your need for achievement is not as high. And this is just an example. Of course, there are outliers, but this is an example of the thematic apperception test for assessing the need for achievement. So what are the characteristics of high need achievers? Investigators focused on entrepreneurial behavior. They discovered that people with a high need for achievement do not always fit our stereotypes of a highly successful business person. For example, we might guess that someone with a high need for achievement is not afraid to take huge risks to get ahead. But as it turns out, high need achievers are only moderate risk takers. Okay? So one of the primary characteristics of high need achievers are that it's not necessary that they take high risks, but more so they take moderate risks. They engage in business ventures with a moderate chance of failure, but avoid highly speculative investments despite potentially large payoffs. Predictably, people with a high need for achievement tackle their work with a lot of energy, which is the second characteristic, but high need achievers don't work hard at everything. Unchallenging routine jobs hold no more interest for high need achievers than they do for anyone else. So you could divide high need achiever characteristics into 5 bullets. They take moderate risks, they tackle work with a lot of energy, they are disinterested in routine, monotonous, boring jobs, they like variety, They prefer jobs that give personal responsibility for outcomes so they can take charge, they're in charge of it. And last but not the least, they want concrete feedback about the performance. Now, there are multiple factors that predict achievement behavior, starting very much from parenting practices. Like we've discussed previously, parenting is very important and it can really shape the way a person behaves or becomes, how the personality is molded growing up. So, if you look at this picture, you would ask your question, you could ask yourself this question. As the parent teaching the child how to bike, you could say, when is the best time to let go and when to hold on? The mother might decide to let the boy fall a few times, but in the process allow him to develop a sense of mastery and independence. However, she might also want to protect him just as little longer so that he can retain his sense of security and confidence. Psychologists argue that such decisions have an impact on the child's need for achievement. Now, think about why this is the case. So, if you see, overbearing, overprotective parents do more harm to a child than benefit. A parent who's able to leave their child with a balanced level of autonomy, balanced level of self mastery, giving the child the opportunity for independence, which is not too much independence, not too much overprotection, just right. It actually creates a healthy personality with a healthy, optimal need for achievement that the child is born with, and shaped throughout their experiences in life. So, a good optimal answer for this question would be if the mother helps the child in the beginning of learning the bike, stays with the kid right at the start, just to give him that sense of security and confidence, and then she allows him to run a couple of trials on his own. She allows him to fall a couple of times so he can learn how to get back up by himself again. And so, factors predicting achievement behavior. The most important of them all are parenting practices. Now, let's look at gender, culture, and achievement. High need for achievement predicts success in the business world for both genders. Because of differences in gender role socialization, men and women may differ in the kinds of achievements they value and how high career achievement ranks among their personal goals. A businesswoman might value success at work, but on occasion she may put other concerns, such as the welfare of her customers, ahead of her personal accomplishments. We see examples of this in women who sometimes make sacrifices for their family rather than pursue career goals. Other investigators find that men and women sometimes differ in the way they define success. Men in our society are more likely to see success in terms of external standards, such as gaining prestige or recognition for accomplishments. In contrast, women are more likely to rely on internal definitions of success, such as whether they accomplish what they set out to do. So, men and women think about achievement in different ways. Men see success in terms of external standards, and women tend to rely on internal definitions of success. Achievement behavior in different cultures. We've heard about individualistic versus collectivist cultures before. When we look at achievement behaviors across cultures, we see that in individualistic cultures, achievement is seen in terms of personal accomplishments. Workers see themselves in competition with their co-workers, which motivates them to work harder. In collectivist cultures, there is the achievement is measured in terms of cooperation and group accomplishments, where professionals are concerned about the emotional and financial well-being of their co-workers. So this is the primary difference between achievement orientation across different cultures. Now, attributions also play an important role in a person's need for achievement. What are attributions? It's basically the what the perception or story you attribute to the outcome of your experience. So, an attribution determines how people feel about their performance and how people perform in similar situations in the future. So, many psychologists are interested in the explanations people generate for why they do well or poorly in achievement situations. According to the attributions approach, we often ask ourselves why we have failed or succeeded. The answer to the question is our attribution, which determines how we feel about the performance and how we perform in similar situations in the future. So, researchers find that people attribute losses if they have attributed losses to unstable sources, such as, oh, I was having a bad day, or, uh, oh, I got unlucky. It actually keeps the hope of winning alive versus, oh, I'm not good enough, or oh, I don't have it in me. So if the source is unstable, if you're crediting the source as something that can be changed, then there is hope of trying again and winning again. One of the ways to improve achievement motivation is to change people's attributions. Now, attributions can be divided into three dimensions: stability, locus, and control. So, people with stable attributions have examples like this. Oh, I did well on that because I had good coordination. Or I did not do well on that because I am afraid of math. So this is a stable attribution, right? It's coming from you and it's stable. Unstable attributions are that, oh, I did well in that because I got lucky. Oh, I didn't do well in that because I fell ill. I got a cold. So these are things that can be changed. The other dimension is locus, so the internal and external attributions, the locus of control, right? So the internal attribution would be, oh, I put in all this extra effort, that's why I succeeded in it. Oh, I did not have the best skills, that's why I failed in it. Now, external attribution, so these are things that come from within you, your own intrinsic qualities. External attributions are something like, oh, the test was so easy, anyone could have gotten an A like I did. Or you could say something like, oh, the test was easy, but the competition is so difficult. It's just, I'm not able to get through because there's too much competition. It's got nothing to do with your internal qualities, it's externally linked. The last is control. So there are controllable attributions and uncontrollable attributions. So people who think that they can control attributions would say, oh, I'm highly motivated. I was highly motivated and that's why I achieved it. Oh, I did not have enough practice or I could have achieved it. And people with uncontrollable attributions would say something like, oh, look, I come from a wealthy family, so I could afford it. I could hire special trainers to help me achieve my weight loss goal. Or you could say, oh, I wasn't able to start my business because of the weak national economy. So these are just some examples of the three dimensions of attributions that people tend to use. We can explain our performance by pointing to stable causes such as intelligence or to unstable causes such as luck. In addition, an attribution may be either internal to us, such as the amount of effort put forth, or external, such as a difficult test. Researchers refer to the dimension as locus. Finally, there is the dimension of control, whether we can control or not control the cause of the success or failure. So, they conducted a study based on the attributions, and this is an interesting experiment that they did. A team of researchers with a group of college freshmen got together, and the students were enrolled in a 2-semester psychology course. After receiving their grade on the first fall semester exam, half of the students attended an attributional retraining class, and the other half a no attribution retraining. These students were told that many freshmen have difficulty, so the people in the attribution retraining were told that many freshmen have difficulty with their classes and that it was possible to improve. In particular, the students were encouraged to make controllable attribution for their performances, like I need to develop better studying strategies. Not only did these students do better on their exams the next semester than students who did not attend the session, but the attribution retaining also helped them in other classes. So you can see here the first year GPA was much higher, or it improved a lot based on the attribution retraining people got, where they learned that the more that they could control how the outcome was attained, the more they were able to achieve, versus basing the outcome on unstable factors. So regardless of how well they performed on the initial test, students who attended the attributional retraining sessions had higher overall GPAs than students who did not receive this training. This has implications for education, sports, business world, and other achievement domains, because it shows you that how you attribute your success or failure determines your later success. Achievement goals. Achievement goals provide targets that people aspire to in achievement situations. So, achievement is not only determined by how we account for performances after the fact, but also by the goals we set for ourselves at the outset. So, goals which are related to achievement are targets, right? And they are set at the outset and they motivate you to achieve the goals. So they can be divided into two categories, mastery and performance. Now, people who have an achievement goal of mastery are concerned with developing competence. They want to master something, they want to develop the skill set for that thing. They are intrinsically motivated in that direction. However, people whose achievement goal is performance, they are more likely concerned with demonstrating accomplishment to others. So if your goal is not mastering it, but just performing, doing well in it, it's to prove a point to someone. It's not really for your own self, but it's to show something. So mastery and performance can further be divided into approach and avoidance categories, and we'll look at this 2x2 model in the next slide. Performance a little bit more before we move forward. Students motivated by a strong mastery goal will work hard to learn the subject matter in a course. Satisfaction comes from a sense of proficiency and a feeling that they understand the material. Performance goals are concerned with demonstrating accomplishments to others. Students motivated by strong performance goals want to obtain a high grade, possibly the highest grade in the class. Satisfaction comes from receiving the recognition that accompanies the achievement. In the typical classroom, we can usually find two students who work equally hard preparing for tests and completing assignments, and who achieve similar grades, yet who are motivated by very different goals. One of these achieving students wants to learn the material. The student is motivated to overcome challenges and to obtain a sense of competence. The other achieving student is likely to ask what he or she needs to do to get a good grade, and then arrange his or her study time to obtain the desired outcome. So when we look at the next slide, we see that achievement can be divided into not just mastery and performance, but also valence, positive and negative. So people aren't just motivated to succeed. Sometimes they are more concerned about not failing. Thus, psychologists also find it useful to draw a distinction between approach goals and avoidance goals. So a person who has a positive, which is approaching success, negative, avoiding failure, their mastery is towards approaching the goal. They want to gain mastery so they can approach the goal. And the same for performance, right? They want to perform well so they can approach this goal. And both are approaching success, versus people who not really think about success, but they're more scared of failure, so they want to run away from failure. So the people want to master certain things, so they avoid the failing. And people want to perform at something, so they avoid failing, not impressing people, something like that. So this is the achievement goal framework, the 2 by 2 model. Effects of mastery and performance goals. So students choose people who have a mastery mindset, choose more challenging tasks, are more interested in their classes, retain information and skills longer. People share information and work with others to achieve common goals. People who are performance oriented affect how well individuals work in groups. People tend to see others as competition, and advantages are limited. So next we'll move on to type A and type B personality. You must have heard of these words before. Strictly speaking, the name is inappropriate because it is not a true typology. Instead of identifying two types of people, A and B, we should think of a trait as on a continuum with extreme type A people at one end and extreme type B people at the other end. There's a little backstory behind the type A type B. Several decades ago, some physicians and medical researchers were frustrated by their inability to identify which patients were likely to suffer from cardiovascular problems. Although they knew high blood pressure, smoking, obesity, and inactivity all contributed to the risk of heart disease, combining these factors still left the researchers unable to predict new cases with much accuracy. But these medical professionals also noticed that their patients who had suffered a heart attack seemed to act differently from other patients. Heart attack victims were more active, energetic, driven than those without the cardiovascular problems. In short, they seemed to have different personalities. Initially, researchers identified this personality dimension as the coronary prone behavior pattern because it seemed consistent of a combination of behaviors associated with coronary disease. Later, this individual difference was called type A, type B, or sometimes just type A. So the common components that make up the type A trait have a higher competitive achievement striving, respond to frustrating situations with anger, whereas the behavior of type A's in terms of motivation for control is that they desire to exercise effective control over the people and situations they encounter. They tend to dominate a group discussion. A type A personality variable often have a sense of urgency and like to do more than one thing at a time. You must know this or recognize this in you or either some family members that you know of. Now, when we look at type A, type B, there is a factor known as hostility that comes into perspective. Now, the hostility component is an important component of the type A behavior. Findings explaining relationships between type A behavior and coronary disease found also the hostility factor. So type A need not be bad for health. By avoiding minor setbacks and frustrations, it is possible to be productive and healthy. People high in hostility aren't necessarily violent or even bossy. Rather, they tend to have a strong reaction to the small frustrations and inconveniences we all experience. They respond to even minor annoyances with expressions of antagonism, disagreeableness, rudeness, surliness, criticalness, and uncooperativeness. They did a study in which they took a bunch of participants and measured their blood pressure, looking at their hostility as well as their interactions. Participants high in hostility showed elevated levels of blood pressure when they interacted with other people. So this is the high hostility group. When they were interacting with other people, they had higher blood pressure. Apparently, the high hostility participants found many of their conversations frustrating or annoying, and this reaction resulted in higher blood pressure. Interestingly, the high hostility women in the study did not have this reaction. Perhaps this is because women generally find social interactions more pleasant and less a source of frustration than men. Some health consequences of high anger and hostility are that high hostility has predicted increased incidence of many illnesses, including asthma, liver disease, arthritis, immune system, weakness of the immune system, with lower pain tolerance, complaints of greater pain among patients, higher cholesterol levels, higher incidence of many cardiovascular diseases, and anger and hostility associated with death. So let's look at social anxiety. Now, social anxiety is also an important dimension to study under the trait approach because it's not just about social anxiety, but it's about the type of personality a person forms based off of this anxiety. It's almost like a predominant, consistent pattern of behavior, of an umbrella of behaviors that fall under the same domain. So, social anxiety is anxiety related specifically to social interactions or anticipated social interactions. People suffering from this experience many of the usual anxiety symptoms like increased physiological arousal, inability to concentrate, feelings of nervousness. But socially anxious people recognize that the source of their discomfort is the social encounter they are now or will soon be engaged in. So, people who have social anxiety, speaking in front of a group creates high levels of nervousness for someone high in this, and they're often concerned about negative evaluation. So, characteristics of socially anxious people, they feel awkward and nervous when interacting with others. They're concerned of others' perceptions about them. They stumble over words and say the wrong things. They feel ashamed and embarrassed in social situations. So, how do we explain social anxiety? The key word would be evaluation apprehension. So, that's the underlying cause of social anxiety. Situations that lend themselves to evaluation by others are the thing that particularly make or provoke socially anxious people. They are afraid of being evaluated by others. Socially anxious people deal with the fear of negative evaluation, and so they avoid social encounters. And this becomes a type of personality. The next thing we'll talk about is emotions. Now, you might think, how does emotions fit into personality? Well, it's also an important dimension to study under this approach because it presents as characteristic of people. So, you could say that you can easily think of people as gloomy, confident, grouchy. In other words, after a little reflection, it is apparent that although each of us experience a wide range of positive and negative emotions, we can also identify relatively stable patterns in emotions that distinguish each person from the people around him or her. And so researchers identified ways of examining emotions as relatively stable personal characteristics by the difference in the affectivity, which is the extent to which a person experiences positive or negative emotions, intensity, which is the strength of the emotions people experience. When you say, oh my God, that person is just too intense, right? It's talking about the strength of the emotion. And the expressiveness, the way people express their emotions. All of these three facets on a consistent basis can also form the way you describe someone's personality. And that's why we're looking at emotions. Okay, so Churchill once noted that a pessimist sees the difficulty in every opportunity, while an optimist sees the opportunity in every difficulty. Consistent with this observation, psychologists find that a positive outlook is often associated with high achievement and high mood. People who approach an upcoming event believing they will do well tend to perform better and feel better about themselves than those who enter the situation thinking things will likely turn out poorly. Similarly, when people face a specific problem, those who believe they will beat the odds tend to do better and feel better than those who think the odds will beat them. Right? So it's like the attributions theory that we talked about just now. So broadly speaking, positive, negative are two dimensions under which people might fall towards how their personality gravitates towards. Each extreme respectively includes emotions as active, content, satisfied, or negative, which are the opposite extremes. They could be nervous, angry, distressed, or calm and serene. So let's look at positive and negative affect examples. High positive affect are people who feel active, elated, enthusiastic, excited, peppy, and strong. Low positive affect are people who feel drowsy, dull, sleepy, and sluggish. High negative affect are people who feel distressed, fearful, hostile, jittery, nervous, scornful, while low negative affect is when people are more so at the lower end. So they're at rest, they're calm, they're relaxed. And you could see it's kind of a continuum from high to low, from high to low. So, how different you are in terms of your positive and negative predilections also predicts a number of behaviors. People high in positive affect act in ways that most people find attractive. They tend to be happy, enthusiastic, and attentive. High scores on negative affect relates to psychological stress, causes a diverse list of emotional problems. People report more health problems and complain more than the symptoms warranted, and it results in difficulty dealing with stress. Strength, affect, intensity, like we said, is the strength or degree to which people experience emotions. High intensity people experience their emotions more intensely, but also tend to be more variable. Differences between high and low intensity people is how they react to the events. This is another study which looked at the daily mood fluctuations in two people, one who was high on intensity and the other low. You can see that the daily mood fluctuations for someone who is not as affectively intense is usually around the moderate level. So they're kind of a balance, right? They're in the neutral. They're sort of like not that extreme. They're somewhere in the middle and towards the positive. While someone who is very intense, their mood can go all the way up to all the way to down -6, to all the way up and then down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, and so on and so forth. And that makes it very hard to navigate around such people because their mood is always very either this way or that way. It's not soft, it's more like strong, extreme, and it goes on in that direction towards the negative side, as you can see in student B's results. So affect intensity also influences the difference in the way people experience happiness. High intensity people, happiness means a lot of exhilarating and enlivening experiences, while low intensity people, happiness takes the form of a calm and enduring sense of contentment. Emotional expressiveness is people's outward display of emotions, right? So a person can be intense, but they may not show it. And so some people, you might think they have such a flat affect. It's potentially because they are not very good at expressing their emotions. For other people, it's almost like, if you've heard of that phrase, they wear their emotions on the sleeve. It's very true. For some people, you can read them so easily. If they're sad, you can tell they're sad. If they're happy, you can tell they're happy. It's very easy to read such people. So we found that women tend to be more expressive and better at reading the emotions in other people's faces. They get along well with others, depends on people's getting along well with others also depends on people's expressiveness. So if, for example, if your boss came up to your office and said you got promoted, and you showed no facial expression, you showed no emotional expressiveness, then that could actually put you in a tough position, because you might not be mirroring, or you might be misinterpreted as someone who's not as happy with the result. But someone who's able to express themselves emotionally and say, "Oh, I'm so happy, that's amazing news," then it's also much easier to get along with people when you're able to communicate and express and mirror other people's emotions in a better manner as well. And emotional expressiveness is also known to be good for our for our psychological health. Like the experiment they had done, where they made asked people to smile, and just the fact of smiling made them feel like they were in a better mood. It's a similar situation. Now, optimism and pessimism. So, what is dispositional optimism? It's the so when we talk about optimism and pessimism, we have to remember again that these are some things that are so consistent and predominant that they make a person feel like that is their predominant personality. So if you've heard before, someone says, "Oh, look, he's such an optimist. He's so optimistic. I love it." Or "He's so pessimistic. It's crazy." So it could also be a dispositional type of personality trait. So optimists effectively prioritize and set higher goals, believe they can reach these goals. They never allow setbacks and temporary failures to get them down. They're connected to coping, well being, and health. Dispositional optimists living in stressful regions experience less anxiety and depression than pessimists. It makes sense. If your view of the world is more on the sunny side, you're obviously able to deal with things in a better manner because you have the hope that things will get better. But if your view of the world is more on the depressive side, and you feel that there is no purpose to life, that life is full of hardships and difficulties, then it's hard to kind of see hope as well, unless you are the type of person who finds optimism within the pessimism. So those are the type of people that exist as well. They see the world in pessimistic ways, but for instance, you could say that the world is full of suffering, but you will see that within the suffering, it's the order that you create. Um, it's the growth that is experienced that makes life worth living. And so, even within pessimism, people can find optimism. And so, it's not a win-win or lose-lose situation. It's how you align yourself and how hopeful you feel that helps you deal with adversity. Optimists deal with adverse situations better than pessimists. It's known optimists and pessimists use different strategies to cope with their problems. So they did another study in which they wanted to check what type of strategies optimists and pessimists use. They found that optimists use more active strategies like problem solving, cognitive restructuring, expressing emotions, social support. Using the active strategies, they were higher on those scores. Whereas pessimists, you can see the lighter bars here, they use more so the avoidance strategies. So they want to avoid the problem, they would rather wishful think, they criticize themselves, they're socially withdrawn. When you find yourselves along these strategies, just be keep yourself in check and see that you're not falling off the radar, because that's not the healthiest situation. Strive to move towards active coping strategies like solving the problem, restructuring your thoughts, expressing your emotions, and gaining support from your friends and family. Sometimes people can't jump from one end to the other. People use active avoidance strategies all the time, flipping back and forth, but it's always good to move towards the active strategies. So, optimism and health. Optimists are in better physical health than pessimists as they find social support, which results in better health. Consist the outlook, which leads to attitudes and behaviors that contribute to good health. And so, that is the ending, folks. Please go through these summary of today's presentation, and all the best.